today, not today, not today, not tomorrow. Get out my way, please. I'm trying to get paid. Not today, not today.
Welcome in. I am Seth. That is Steve. We are rolling into week 5. How you feeling, Steve?
Oh, feeling great. Had a hell of a week last week, and I can't wait to do it again. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm good. That had to be one of, I don't know, top 5 college game day weekends. I don't know. I can remember in the past couple of years. I mean, it was stacked from noon kickoff all the way to that game in Notre Dame. We're going to kind of get into everything. But before we jump into the matchup map, please, we would love you and be so grateful if you could like and subscribe. It helps us tremendously. We want to get you the information that we have, and that is the best way to do it. So please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. It helps the channel tremendously. Without further ado, Steve, let's hop in to the matchup map. Let's break down what kind of happened in week 4. And really the thing I'm excited about is we're kind of starting, well, not kind of, we're starting our time in conference play. And we're really going to start to define the matchup map, how strong teams really are. They'll have similar opponents, and we'll really see things come into, how they will probably look here, starting right around now. So really excited for that to happen. Break down a couple of teams, from week 4. What do you, any big takeaways here looking at the matchup map after week 4 and our first kind of in-conference gameplay?
Yeah, the couple of big things I take away is, one, Oregon's for real. And as a Pac-12 fan, went to undergrad here, went to grad school here, you and I both, right? We're used to saying, Pac-12 is a basketball school, not really in football. We do well, we get highly ranked, then we kind of shit the bed when it comes close to, playoff time. Can we get in that top 4? But Oregon looked so legit on all phases of the ball. And we called that, right? We said it's going to be a blowout. We were saying Colorado was doing great, but they're punching high, but still, that was an absolute beatdown. And then, for me, Notre Dame is another one of those schools where historically I always think they play well during the regular season, and then they choke when they get these big matchups. And that kind of played out here again as well with, the whole fiasco of having 10 players on the field for that last 2 snaps.
Yeah.
But I will say Notre Dame, really, if Ohio State is who we think they're supposed to be, Notre Dame, I think, is a legitimate elite team. And then my last 2 takes real quick. One, Miami. No one's talking about Miami Hurricanes.
Nope.
They're not ranked, but you look at where they're at on the offensive side of that EPA or that matchup map, right? They are doing work under the radar. That's a team I'm definitely keeping my eye on. And then the last thing I want to say is, again, we're getting the conference play, like you said, so we'll see how good this really is. But my God, Michigan. On the defensive side of the ball, not only are they literally in a category of their own when you look at the defensive EPA play ranks, but look at it from an absolute standpoint. They're the only team in the nation with a negative defensive EPA per play, which is what you want. That's really good.
Yeah, it's tough to do in college. Yeah.
Yes. How about you?
Yeah, no, I'm with you all the way on the Miami take. I think they're sneakily good. I mean, we had a little bit of buzz on them preseason. Our model leaned in that over, and it was right on the edge of pulling the trigger or not. But this is a team that Mario Cristobal, his first full year in recruiting, he's got a blue chip ratio of something like 50%. And not to mention a really huge quality win in my opinion, where they went to A&M and beat them. If it wasn't in A&M, at least they played an SEC team and won. I think that's a pretty big signature win. Can't agree more with the Notre Dame stuff. Really questionable as far as, the end of the game, but the overall play, I'm not surprised. I mean, our model put that number right at 3. I think we even said last week, this is a game, you take Notre Dame 3.5, you're good. You take Ohio State 2.5, you're good. And it was exactly that. And I think that was a good matchup. And, the big question here, and we're going to talk about it right away. I think Notre Dame's going to be tested again. They got to play Duke. And what does that look like? Because this Duke team is for real, and they're not messing around. I think the overall ACC is just a little bit stronger as a whole rather than from the top kind of bottom. And that's a thing that I think we're going to see it throughout the season. Clemson, Florida State, Cade Klubnik, again, basically we can say the same thing. And when does it basically no longer an acceptable excuse? But turnovers cost them the game. Turnovers cost them the game in Duke. Turnovers cost them the game against Florida State. And, you can say that they deserve to win the game, but if you're going to turn the ball over in these huge spots, it's hard for me to say, you deserve to win the game. And I think for me, Florida State is not as dominant as they were last year in my memory. They're not blowing teams out. They squeaked out Boston College. They squeaked out in Clemson. And now I think Clemson is a good team, but this is not just some crazy dominant team. Any thoughts on that Florida State and Clemson kind of matchup?
No, I think that's spot on. And I want to be one of the first on the internet to ever do it, admit when I'm wrong. All right. I came into the season and I said, hey, listen, after that Duke game, Clemson was on my, upset alert. The sky is falling. Dabo doesn't know what he's doing. How can you lose to Duke? Duke is a damn good team. Duke is a damn good team through and through and through. And I was wrong on that. Now, to your point, I still have questions because you're right. FSU is not a dominant team. Now, you have two schools of thoughts. You can say either they're clutch when it counts, and we saw this a little bit from Georgia a couple of years ago, where they had this little run where they really weren't blowing out teams they should have blown out, but they were winning, right?
Yeah.
And then, or you can say, no, Clemson's really good, or Clemson's okay, and FSU is not, and FSU needs to look over its back. And I think I'm in that latter camp. I don't think FSU is as good as we thought in the preseason. And I'm not quite so sure they're going to win the ACC if they don't kind of tighten things up soon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm crazy here. The Florida State has to play Duke, they have to play Miami, and they have to play Florida. I do not think it's crazy that they lose to at least one of those and maybe two.
Yeah.
I don't know that Florida State makes it out here unscathed. And I don't want to call it an upset alert because I think this is going to be this is just such a really, really interesting season in college where there's a couple of top heavy teams, but even those teams are super susceptible. I think we're going to have a 2-loss, team in the playoff. I can really see that. That's an easy transition here into Alabama. As far as I've been tracking EPA, them not in the quadrant of elite and only in good defense, bad offense. They obviously got the win against Ole Miss, but that's a really, really interesting phenomenon to see from an Alabama team. Now, characteristic good defense, but the fact that they cannot and do not have an efficient offense is pretty wild because that's not what we think of when we think of Alabama. I mean, Miller looked all right, but really explosive plays, converting on third down. I mean, truly just kind of bailing out. And now shame on Ole Miss for not capitalizing when they were in the lead at one point and definitely could have pulled away, and they did not. The SEC West, I don't like Alabama's going to win just because no one wants to win that. I don't. You know about LSU? LSU is not the team we thought they are this year. They are, in my assessment, really underperforming. You can see where they are defensively. This is one of the worst schools in the nation as far as defensive EPA, and that's pretty uncharacteristic. This is a team that was firmly in the quadrant of elite last year. Any thoughts on LSU? Is it kind of sell that dream, or you still holding on hope?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think at this point you have to start to believe teams when they tell you who they are, and I think that's where we're getting dangerously close as we enter conference play with LSU. And you're right. I mean, going back to Alabama, we really don't see this, and I know it's kind of hard to see for those watching on the matchup or on YouTube right now. But the Alabamas are right there above, on top of Nebraska, right above Rutgers, right next to Memphis. And you go through that, you look at their schedules of the LSUs, of the Arkansas, like what are they gonna do if they can't keep up? And with on the offensive side, now their defense has been good, and I think quite frankly that's where they shine against Ole Miss because I need a chance to watch that game like every second of it, but I was tuning in, tuning out, and I felt like if I looked away for a minute and a half, Ole Miss had the ball and they didn't have the ball anymore.
Yeah.
So
no,
I mean,
exactly that.
So at some point that defense gets tired, for Ole Miss, and Alabama maybe has a little bit of wiggle room there. But man, I've got questions up and down about these perennial juggernauts. But that excites me. I'm actually excited for that, though.
Yeah.
I think it's time to mix up college football a little bit. And by God, I think this is the year it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I to steal a take from part of my take, Big Cat had one of the really, really great intelligent takes here, which is this is the perfect year for the 12 team playoff. Because there's legitimately 12 teams that could win this year because there isn't like a top heavy, couple teams. Now, I one kind of last thing I want to touch on here in the SEC. is this kind of now Georgia's to own for until further notice? I mean, it's really difficult to see. Maybe LSU somehow comes out of that. That looks really improbable. So let's just say it's Alabama's to win. They make it out the West. To me, it doesn't even seem like a no-brainer that Georgia will win when they go to the SEC championship, because Georgia doesn't have to play anybody. Tennessee is probably their biggest speed bump, and quite frankly, they're pretty weak this year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Completely agree. And I think that's what you're doing. And right now, it's just pretty much Georgia coasting their way. As long as they don't have a catastrophic failure, you got to think it's theirs to lose, because through 4 weeks or through 3 weeks, right? That's the one team where, you haven't necessarily seen this, oh, that's not right moment, right? Now, again, they're playing cupcakes, right? And sorry for the South Carolina UAB fans, etc. But, it is what it is, right? But yeah, I'm with you all the way.
Yeah. And I know we talked about Oregon. We're going to talk about a matchup for SC, but I think it's worth just touching Pac-12, specifically Washington, USC. You got Penix, you got Williams. To me, they're the two front runners for Heisman. And really interesting, one thing we called out preseason, looking forward here in the Pac-12, they changed the championship this year. That's going to be defined by win percentage. There is this interesting wrinkle that we kind of discovered. SC, Oregon, Washington all play each other. So there's a weird situation where one of these teams, and well, obviously there are three of them, one of them doesn't make it into the Pac-12 championship game, and that very easily could be SC. Is that a crazy take in your mind?
No, and I absolutely love it, but you're absolutely right. You're 100% right, and I'm all for it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, bear down. We're hoping U of A. I mean, U of A is basically about to enter the gauntlet. They go, I don't know if they're in Washington this year, but they go to Washington this week, but they know they play Washington this week. And then they have SC right after. So we'll see if they can stay in the quadrant of elite. I know ASU is able to cover against SC. So, maybe a cover in both those games is what we're looking for. But man, the Pac-12, RIP, will continue to say it, but this is an interesting year. Their last year just seems to be some of the best football I remember being in the Pac-12. So, shout out to the Pac-12. I don't know. That's kind of it for me right now. Other than I would just say Ohio State just seems to be on this steady climb, getting better every week. I would also throw Oklahoma and Texas in there, where they're just getting better and better and better. And then now we're about to see them go to war with, within the conference. So we got the Red River rivalry in 2 weeks. And then we got the Kansas matchup this week, which is going to be huge for Texas. Oklahoma, they're, we're going to talk about that game, but they're 20-point favorites. So that kind of dynamic is shaping up to me, because I think depending on who wins that in week 6 between Oklahoma and Texas, that could be the team that makes the playoff out of the Big 12. So that's something that I'm really keen to kind of keep my eye on, because both those teams have the talent and have the kind of schedule and play to get there, I think, in my opinion. Anything in the Big 12?
No, well, listen, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it for you. Shout out for, Seth calling this out 5 weeks ago, but by God, Kansas, right? 4-0. I mean, this team was, a team where, they had a great offense, but they were given 50, 60 points up a game at times. And they just couldn't keep up. Or couldn't shut it down, I should say. And look at them now, first. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, we'll see what happens this week, and we'll talk about that spread and how big it is. But man, I mean, talk about 0 to heroes. This is an exciting time for college football.
Yeah, I mean, it was really looking at their offensive efficiency, and this is a team that was returning the most production on offense, and this was one of the top 10 offenses in college last year. So just on a sheer scoring points, I'm not surprised that they're 4-0 at this point, only because if you can score points, you're going to be in games. Now, I can't take the credit that I didn't know they would get better, this much better on defense. Now, they haven't necessarily played, and this Texas game is going to be a big, big litmus test here. But if they mess around and beat Texas, like, that'll be crazy, right? I mean, just to put it in perspective, we got plus 5,000. The best number I can see in the market right now is 2,500. But none of my tickets are worth anything yet. They still don't believe that I got them yet. So we'll see what ends up happening. All right. I think that's a good transition. Obviously, remember, if you want to check out the matchup maps, they're on the website for free. go over to bullytheboard.com and check them out and use these in your handicapping. They make a tremendous help for you to understand where teams are strong versus offense and defense and how they match up against each other. And that's why we call it the matchup map. All right. So for the fun part, we get to recap what happened in week 4 from the model. And man, I love weeks like this when we get to show green mostly on the screen. It was a profitable week in college and it was beautiful. Overall, we went 5-3. And man, we had every opportunity to cover a lot of these games. I don't know if you got a chance to see the Appalachian State ending. Spear in my heart. They were winning by a touchdown. Then Wyoming went on a literally 20-second drive, scored had an explosive play, scored a touchdown. Appalachian, now they're down, and we had +2.5. Appalachian State throws a pick. Basically, they don't cover. They lose exactly by 3. They threw the pick in the red zone. They could have just kicked a field goal to go to at least overtime. Whatever, you move on. And then BYU Kansas. Hey, we just got done talking about Kansas. Kansas was so efficient that they got all the way into the red zone. I think there was like a minute left, and they were literally, it was 4th down, and they didn't go for it. They just decided to kick the field goal. So we had 8.5. They were winning exactly by 8, but obviously the field goal puts us over. So how are you feeling about week 4? Any of these games were you super excited about? I mean, I know we talked like a lot of, for me personally, this card was a little bit uncomfortable, put me outside of my comfort zone of betting on teams I wouldn't normally bet on, but this is why you do it, right? The model is identifying value.
Yeah, 100%. Never in my life would I ever lay down my hard-earned money on a Georgia State game. And what was the best part about this was that was a Thursday night game, and not only did they cover, they outright won. You know, and so to your point, I mean, it allows you, the model allows you to have, proverbially so many more eyes on teams at one given time than you ever could yourself. So I mean, that was great. And then kind of rolling into the weekend. I was actually in Chicago for a cousin's wedding, so I'm like at the wedding, at the ceremony, like checking the phone, looking up, trying to pay attention. So I missed a little bit of it.
Commercial. You're the guy in the Allstate commercial. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, I mean, these are weeks that you live for. And these are, if nothing else, they are extremely reassuring, right? Because you don't let your biases get in the way. You don't let your emotions get in the way because you're going into this completely blind and you're trusting the model. And boy, oh boy, did it earn that trust this week.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. I did get a weird comment where someone was saying like, well, you're always questioning, the model. And it's like, well, the ultimate litmus test of trusting the model is betting the model. Right. And I think to your point there, like to the eyes on so many more teams, right? Because these are measured statistics. It's not like we pick this statistic for that team and look for this matchup. I see a lot of handicappers, that are doing this, and they just pick and choose when the analytics or what analytics make sense for that game and this and that. And I think a model like this where you're putting in what is this team doing, who are they right now, and what does that effect actually mean, right? That's what you're trying to quantify. And then you're trying to quantify that edge to see where you have EV. So obviously really good to see this. We're hoping we can keep it rolling, but a new week is upon us. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to break down, I think, some of the biggest matchups in our mind. There's about 5 matchups that we're going to break down today. The first one we're going to get into is Utah at Oregon State, I believe. This is currently sitting at 3.5 at Oregon State. Cam Rising, from my understanding, is still questionable / out. He hasn't played yet. Obviously, that does change things. If we really break down these teams here, Oregon State is kind of head over heels, more efficient on offense, no doubt about it. And Utah's better on defense, but they're pretty comparable. Both these teams are good on defense. Obviously, the model leans Oregon State. The market also leans Ohio State. Steve, what are your thoughts here initially? I mean, this is a Pac-12 game, RIP, so we got to get them while we can. But this is, I believe, the Friday night matchup, so a little bit early. Is the Cam Rising, thing make it so it's not a play for you, or is there an angle there?
Yeah, no, I think the Cam Rising thing, honestly, for me, even if Cam Rising plays or doesn't play, whether it's Cam Rising or Nate Johnson, I actually really love Oregon State in the spot here. Now, I know they're coming off that tough loss against Washington State, but for me, my biggest question is, what are you going to do on offense? Like you mentioned, you have two really good defensive teams, right? And we saw that on the matchup map. You can see it here, right here on the defensive EPA per play and defense success rate. But Oregon State is just a league ahead, and that only gets worse when you go on offense, right? And that offensive EPA per play, I mean, by God, 0.09 to 0.38. And that's led by Damian Martinez running the ball. I think he's averaging something like 7 yards per carry, some monster number, right? Utah has not really faced anyone like this. And fared well against it. So for me, I love this spot for Oregon State. I love this spot for the offense, and I think you're going to have a grind them out game where Utah just can't keep up offensively, and -1, -3, whatever it is, as long as it's a one possession game, I feel extremely comfortable.
Yeah, the one thing I will point out here, and we'll see how this develops, and these things are definitely situational, but if we look at that offensive success rate pass, what is that exactly? That's the success rate these offenses have on obvious passing downs, basically 3rd and long. But if you look at the defensive success rate on those obvious passing downs, what do we see? What we see is Oregon is way, way, way more efficient on those 3rd downs, but Utah's defense is really good at not giving those 3rd downs up. So to me, if you're betting that one way or the other, if you're betting Utah, you're basically betting that what's going to happen is Utah stays true to that number. If you're betting Oregon, you think that number is going to go up in this game, and Utah is maybe not going to be able to stop them on 3rd down, and this team will just keep drives alive, keep rolling, like you're saying, through the run game, through the pass game. And, I guess I would lean towards an efficient offense, but I think, one thing the model has taught me is don't rule out those defensive matchups, because that's why the model puts this at a pick 'em for a reason, because of those the defensive numbers can play a role here, and Utah can have a chance to slow a really efficient offense down. The question becomes for me, who have these teams played? And I guess Utah going in to Florida, I don't remember if that was at Florida, but playing Florida, an SEC team, just from an overall, we know that team has a blue chip ratio of 80%. Just from a talent team, that's a very, very talented, raw talent Florida team. So I think that's a pretty big signature win, in my opinion, for Utah, where it's hard for me to say the same for Utah State. Am I missing something there? Have they played a big school? I can't remember. I know they played San Jose State. They've been rolling.
UC
I know
Davis.
that. UC Davis.
Yeah. So Oregon State had San Jose State, UC Davis, San Diego State, and then their loss to Washington State. Whereas Utah has had, like you mentioned, they were at home against Florida.
Okay.
They beat Baylor 2013. They beat Weber State, and then they beat UCLA 14-7.
So I mean, those are, to me, that's a lot more signature wins for Utah or games. And maybe I believe their numbers a little bit more than I do for Oregon State, and we may be getting a little bit overhyped. I mean, even the model's telling us with those inflated numbers, the number's 0. This is a pick 'em. So I don't know. Be weary out there. I mean, it sounds like me and Steve are a little bit. I'm not betting this, so I don't know if you are betting this. Yeah. I'm not betting this, but I have to say, based off what we kind of just went over, I would feel most comfortable betting Utah here, because I think we may know more about that team, and these defensive numbers specifically may be more legit versus inflated offensive numbers from Oregon.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I would be curious about is, I know, and I haven't watched every Utah game. I know they've had a couple of, I don't want to necessarily call them fluke, but really explosive plays that I don't know how reproducible they are. Right? Like, so Utah is not an explosive offense; they're a grind them out.
Less than 2%. Here it says less than 2% of their plays are explosive, right? But 2.5% for Oregon State.
Right. No, and that's spot on. And I guess my question becomes here is, going through this whole Cam Rising versus Nate Johnson thing, if Oregon State, to your point, if Utah is the team where we have more of this is truly who they are, can Oregon State now go into this matchup and game plan and really force Utah to have to be a more Nate Johnson led aerial attack? Or can they have this balancing? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't. But you have a team here, in my mind, that I think is a little more equipped offensively and pretty on par defensively. Can you game plan and force a Utah team that we really haven't seen before in a more of an aerial attack, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I do hear you on defense. I would just worry that when you play these weak teams, that it's easy to have inflated defensive numbers.
For sure.
And you could see the success rate on defense on pass downs is almost 3 times as much. I mean, it's a good number, but it's still nowhere near the kind of the real good lockdown, what it looks like third downs that Utah's having. And I think that's, to me, where I see this matchup jumps off for me. And then the talent aspect. Blue chip ratio 40% for Utah, only 10%, but they're rolling up there. So I don't know. I would just use caution. You would be very shocked, or maybe you wouldn't be very shocked when you have a model. Our model is adjusted R-squared is 42%, meaning our model describes 42% between what was predicted and what actually happened. So not quite half, but pretty dang close. So these numbers are not far off from reality, and I would just use caution there. So anybody, I mean, to your point, Steve, a 3.5 spread, right? One possession here. I think the market's very in line with that, and the model's in line with that. But be cautious, in your 10-leg parlays where you're thinking this one's a slam dunk, and you buy it up to -14 or something crazy for Oregon State. Don't be surprised if that number comes pretty dang close to where the market is. All right. Heading into the next matchup, we got USC heading into Colorado, high altitude. After getting stomped out last week in Oregon, Utah did not cover an ASU, and this spread is now sitting at 21. The opening spread, this was a look-ahead line, so it really did open around this 21.5, not necessarily that 27 that you see there. So it would lean currently in the direction of USC with the market right around 21. Again, we talked about the kind of beatdown that happened in Colorado. We talked a little bit about Oregon when we first started. I guess I'll go first here a little bit. I definitely don't think this will be the same dominant performance that we saw from Oregon. Why? In my opinion, USC is not the same defensive team, and I do think that Colorado will have a little bit of offensive success here. But honestly, that's a little bit of my bias. I still want USC to prove to me that they're a lockdown defense like Oregon can be, and some of these other really good defensive teams. We know who they are offensively. That EPA is insane here. It's just popping off the charts, popping off the matchup maps. But if you look defensively, I mean, yes, they're better than Colorado, but this is a median defense at best in college.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. And here's where I actually take your advice and your wisdom about caution looking at these numbers without relative sort of context, right? Meaning, who is USC played? And I think this is a classic example of a team who, listen, USC is a great offense. I'm not saying that. USC is absolutely potent, but these numbers might be a little inflated. And we know Colorado can absolutely put up points. So to me, the key difference is the defense. And now, has USC won their games? Absolutely. But what concerns me, that San Jose State game, the San Jose State was in that game for a very long time before USC kind of pulled away. ASU was in that game for a while before USC kind of pulled away. So can Colorado, who's more adept at putting up points, make this a shootout, keep this close? Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. I don't see this being the absolute beatdown that Oregon was. I'm step in step with you for that.
Yeah, and really look at the defensive explosive rate that USC is giving up. I mean, 3% of plays on defense they're giving up to opposing offenses. That's perfect for a backdoor. That's perfect for Colorado to get a couple of big plays specifically early in the game. And to your point, they end up pulling away later in the game by a possession or two, but makes it really difficult to cover. I don't know if USC is at risk to lose this game, but you never know what Deion's got up his sleeve there. They obviously went to Oregon, got whooped, but what does it look like now? Because this is their first kind of test as who are we after a loss, right? And I will say I'm done being a hater. I was a hater for that one game because our model really liked it, but I mean I have if Prime has showed me one thing, it's that he can adapt and he's really good. And so for me, there isn't a whole lot of reason to think, oh, this Colorado team will just like slide for some reason. I don't think that that's the type of coaching he's doing. And although his teams are a little cocky, I think it's mostly rooted in their preparation. I think they're they're not cocky in preparation, and that's why they have a little bit of antics. But the reality is, for the most part, they've earned that, in my opinion. So it'll be really interesting to see this game, and I think I think that this defensive explosive rate is really where I'm most concerned for USC. If I'm a better wanting to lay the 21.5, because that's a lot of points. And I don't believe, do you remember, how much did ASU win by last week? It was like right around 3 possessions, I think.
They lost by 14. ASU lost by 14 because the
okay, wow. So they weren't able to hold, I believe. Wow, okay. So they weren't able to hold ASU, and that was a 33-point spread, I believe. So it's much bigger. Something to keep an eye on there.
Their third string quarterback, Drew Pine, for ASU.
All right, yeah. A lot of reasons here to be skeptical, and we've been talking about this. This is the first part of the season where we're getting to in-conference play, so you're getting much, much more similar athleticism and opponent and things like that, and there are cause for concern. Now, would I be surprised if USC goes and wins by 28? Not necessarily, but I think that explosive rate is something to watch. I mean, you can see there that Colorado can score points, and we've seen that before. We look back to our time week 1 at TCU. So I don't know. Any last thoughts here on this game, Steve?
Yeah, I think the only last thing, and this is not really a factor for me one way or the other, but it will be interesting to see how this team rallies with another game without Travis Hunter, one of their star players who had that lacerated kidney against Colorado State. We don't speculate here in terms of how do you calculate or quantify that sort of emotional factor? But that's clearly been a thing in the news here. He's a big player on the field, big player in the locker room. Now, he wasn't responsible for 36 points, not for any loss by any stretch of the imagination, right? But it'll be interesting to see what this Colorado team looks like for another week without one of their big name players. But again, I'm still with you. These teams have done more with less. I'm looking at ASU against USC. So again, I think this game is definitely within 3 scores.
Yeah, I agree. Something I am not betting, but I would definitely lean that way as well. All right, heading into our third matchup. This one's kind of sexy. It's ugly sexy in my opinion. We got Duke versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame obviously coming off that huge game against Ohio State and a heartbreaking loss, quite frankly, that they easily could have won. No doubt about that. The model is leaning just a little bit in the direction of Notre Dame. The market currently is sitting at 5.5 for Notre Dame, and I don't know. I part of me wants to not listen to the model here and bet Duke. Am I crazy here for saying that? I'm kind of want all in on the Duke hype, and I'll tell you why. This team is not being talked about, and if you look at these numbers, offensive success rate 57%. On third down, 45%. I mean, can that be better? Yeah, but are they avoiding third down? We don't know. Defensive success rate, really good. On third down, it's elite. Their explosives, pretty good. Defensive explosives, pretty limited. You like to see that. Now, I don't like that they have a blue chip ratio of 0. I wish, this team had a couple more 4 or 5 star recruits, but they are rolling up there. They, they obviously got the huge win against Clemson. I think they got the confidence that can kind of lead them throughout the whole season. Like, if they just kind of keep beating these Goliaths, who's to say, that they can't, right? They have the confidence to do it. Walk me off the ledge here.
Yeah, if this spread's 7.5, I'm with you all day. For me, this is an overreaction to the Notre Dame loss. I think and listen, I'm not gonna pretend to know what the market's thinking and why it's moving. Obviously, you want to be careful about, lines moving against you when we talk about CLV and all that stuff. But with that being said, Notre Dame should have won that game against Ohio State. Yeah. Why they didn't is a whole discussion for another day. Obviously, the 10 players at the end was a big problem. Notre Dame has a history of kind of not playing well in these high-profile games, but that's a game they should have won. And I see this game as a get-right game for Notre Dame. They're taking care of a team who Notre Dame is who we think they are. Duke is on the up and up. I will give you that. But this is a team that I feel across the board, offensively, defensively, explosive plays, blue chip ratio. Like, this is a team built to cover a touchdown spread. Anything more than that, Duke is on the rise. Duke is dangerous. I'm in your corner, Seth, but 6.5. I gotta take the Fighting Irish.
That's fair. And I'm really high on Sam Howell and how like it's clear to me them having an elite quarterback is really differentiating them. And they, like you said, they could have easily won that game at Ohio State. I mean, and when you're talking about a 6.5 open and now it's sitting at 5.5, we're really not crossing one way or the other here on that key number. So until it does go through 7, in my opinion, I don't know if you can put so much weight at in that 1 point situation we're in now. And maybe this is the situation where you do, we talked about trusting the model. And then, of course, then I'm arguing that I shouldn't trust it. But maybe this is the exact situation where, you love that 5.5. Why? Because you can get that 7. They win by a touchdown. And then I think back to maybe an argument that I've made before, just a week ago. Did we overreact and crown Duke too early on that Clemson win? After, if you look at the box score, if you really study that game, Clemson should have won the game. And that was a Clemson, for the most part, shooting themselves in the foot. So are we, and the model would agree here, perceiving Duke as a really strong team, but they've really actually had a number of things go their way that if you, had a chance to see this again, maybe not. Whereas Notre Dame, the opposite was true, right? Things haven't gone their way, at least last week. And, this is a time that we can, get a little bit of value at the 5.5. Maybe that's more in line with the truth. I love that blue chip ratio for Notre Dame. Yeah.
No, 100%. Now, can I play devil's advocate on myself to your point?
Sure, let's do it. Yeah, I want to do it. I want to hear it.
So you talk about quarterback play. So I will give you one nugget of no, this is why Duke's going to cover this game. So okay. Sam Hartman, right? Transfer from Wake Forest. So Duke's played Wake Forest. Duke's played Sam Hartman.
Yeah.
And Duke has beaten a Sam Hartman-led Wake Forest team. So if any team on this schedule is going to know how to game plan effectively, who has the most in-person experience, it's going to be Duke. Anything can happen.
Okay, well, let me devil's advocate here. But I think we did make this argument against NC State, and look how they handled NC State. So meaning he knows how to, because he's seen these teams, he knows how to beat them. So maybe that's another move here for Notre Dame. As I keep arguing, I feel a little bit more comfortable betting Notre Dame here. I think laying the 5.5 is even more EV based off of our numbers. And I think that angle, even though maybe I'm taking it the opposite way, could be the angle that I'm looking for here to kind of make the decision for me, which is that I think that maybe they're a little bit more efficient just because he knows what they're going to throw at him. Now, he was on Wake last year, right? So he played them as recent as last year. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'm overall high though on Duke though. I mean, Duke made me a lot of money last year. I was able to bet on them. They're kind of an unsexy team, but they do win games, and more importantly, they do cover. Now, this is a new season, and they are obviously getting a little bit more attention. So something to keep an eye on here. Anything else on this game?
No, but this is a game I'm not entirely sure where I land on with my money, but a game I will be watching. This is a great data gathering game.
Yeah, I'm actually going to commit to myself. I will bet Notre Dame 5.5. I will put that on my card. I will bet Notre Dame 5.5. I do think here, looking at the numbers, talking about the angles, trusting the model, give me the 5.5. I'll take it home. I'll live and die on that hill. All right. I think this is the last one. We got 2 more. Okay, this one I'm super excited about. We talked about the 5 plus 5,000 Big 12 championship for Kansas. We have Kansas going into Texas, man, oh man, Big 12 matchup. This is obviously Texas's last time, in the Big 12. So, they're on their kind of ass whooping tour, so to speak. This Texas team, in my mind, has gotten better and better every week. And tell me if you disagree. I think they have the biggest signature win so far in college football, going into Tuscaloosa and just putting it down on them. Roll Tide, I guess, not that night. This game, a little bit scary for me because I think this is when potentially my Kansas tickets go to shit and they all go to 0, where they just kind of get whooped by a superior team. Now, not offensively, but I think defensively is where we're going to see Kansas get slowed down a little bit and not be able to slow down Texas. And then the talent overall, I'm really worried. I'm not going to lie to you here. 64% blue chip ratio for Texas, 0 blue chip ratio for Kansas. These guys, they are efficient on offense, no doubt about it, but these are not a bunch of 4- and 5-star recruits.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is kind of the equivalent of the Cinderella story where the clock strikes midnight here. I love Kansas's ceiling here. I love what they're doing so far. But this 18 and a half spread is 18 and a half for a reason. I think that is a very fair number, not just
Yeah.
from my own personal belief, but clearly what the model outputs shows as well, right? And so what you're looking at here is you hit it directly on, Seth. You're looking at two offensively gifted teams. What Kansas definitely leading the pack there on the EPA per play, but by God, that defensive EPA is going to be something that's going to hurt Kansas right now. Remember, this is a Texas team that won 55-14. Now, it's not the same exact team, but last time they matched up, this was an absolute blowout. And if Kansas is not careful, I think this has the making of a potential blowout, shootout or blowout, no in between.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, now Kansas' defense last year was highly suspect, and I don't necessarily rule that out yet for this Kansas team, but it looks like they've improved a little bit better. This number now is sitting at -16 for Texas. I think the true open was at 17, not 18 and a half. That was a look ahead line. So this number's sitting kind of right around open, a little bit of war there between the two teams. I think you're exactly right here. And I'm sure that's what's going on in the market here. When we look at explosives, that's where I'm a little bit worried. Offensively, we think Kansas is really efficient on a per play metric they are, which is overall good for consistency. But that explosive rate on offense for Texas is almost 3%. And then, they're going up against a worse defense. That could spell trouble to me. And that's, to your point, the boom or bust kind of reality. 55-14 maybe, knocking again. Now, this to me is a huge test. And really, to be honest, is probably the make or break of my ticket. Now, what I don't mean by that is I don't think Kansas necessarily wins this game, nor do I think they have a chance to. But if they can keep this to like a 14-point game, that's actually going to be really, really, really good for me in Kansas going forward, because they're going to have a shot to be in a lot of the Big 12 games. To your point, if they get blown out here, then more than likely that's what's going to happen to the rest of these big games when they go play Oklahoma. Sure, they can beat up on the middle, or they can be in shootouts the middle of the Big 12, but those kind of elite teams are probably going to get whooped by. So to me, this is the biggest data point that I'm looking to gather for that futures ticket. Any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think my last thought here is where I'm concerned about Kansas. And again, I keep going back to the words of wisdom that you dropped earlier are these numbers trustable, or really are these numbers inflated from who they played? With Kansas, right. So you had Illinois, but if you look at the matchup map, technically a very close, but technically below average offensive EPA, right around the cusp. Yeah. They played BYU, who was closer to not being a good offense, right there underneath Michigan State at around the 0.1 line.
Yeah. Yep.
And then you've got Nevada, right?
Which is just dog shit.
Right. So from an offensive standpoint, right, these are, I'm sorry, for a Kansas defensive standpoint, they're going against offensive teams who are not very efficient. We can make the case of Illinois being an average team here, right? So now you look at what they're going up against, and Texas is definitely going to be the biggest test they've had so far.
Because Texas played Bama, Baylor, Rice, and Rice is trending to be kind of competitive this year. Who did they play in week 4?
Here, I can tell you real quick.
I think did they play Baylor last week?
Yeah, they had Rice, then Bama, then Wyoming, then Baylor.
Wyoming. Yeah, and Wyoming has been kind of upsetting teams too. And so I know Wyoming gave them a bit of a headache, but they won that game very handedly. So I think you're right here. When you look at who they've played, they've definitely not played anywhere near the same level of competition. And so the actual numbers we're seeing from an efficiency standpoint for Texas are probably going to show themselves maybe a little bit more than Kansas, but we'll see. This is Kansas's first test for a good offense going up a truly good defense. And so if they're able to have success against that defense, then that spells really good things for me in the future. But I think to your point, if they don't, this bet is probably DOA, and it doesn't really get much better from here on out. All right, cool. Any play in this game? Are you going to play this game? Kind of avoid.
I think I'm gonna sit on the sidelines. I am torn. Like I said, my heart wants to play Texas, but by God, I want that Kansas ticket to keep rising. Yeah. So
Yeah, you and me
with
both.
no Evie here. I'm conflicted.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna sit this one out.
Yeah, I'm with you. There just doesn't seem to be a perceived edge. I think you're exactly right. Like I could see Kansas losing by 10 points, or I can see them losing by 42 points. And I don't think it's going to be anywhere near. So I feel like no matter what you bet, it's probably going to be a sweat. Just hoping you're on the right side of that. Okay, the last matchup, we're going to the SEC here. We talked about Ole Miss last week, and we're now talking about Ole Miss LSU. This is a pretty interesting matchup. This is a top 25 matchup for both these teams. Ole Miss coming off a loss against Alabama. In my opinion, they definitely had a lot of opportunities to win that game. And on the LSU side, this is a team that is really disappointing. Now, that's kind of maybe an overreaction. They only really have one loss, but they have not come out and impressed me in any real way. And, more importantly, I think we're also starting to learn Florida State isn't this juggernaut that we thought maybe they were week one. So it's even more concerning to me. Any initial thoughts on this game, Steve?
I truly don't know what to think. I mean, there are games where like we have the model, right? There's games where we have an angle and we have a sort of a perceived sort of line here for an edge. And then there are games where I admittedly have no idea up from down, left or right. And this is one of those games for me. Like for everything you just said, Ole Miss, I was hell-bent. What you couldn't tell me anything other than Ole Miss was a better team than Alabama, and they were going to go in and do work, and they absolutely did not. And they faltered on the offensive end. And then you have this LSU team who, yes, they had the loss of FSU. They destroyed Grambling State, right? But other than that, they really haven't shown me much. Now, they did beat up Mississippi State, but they had a pretty tight game against Arkansas. So, like, really, who is this LSU team that we can reliably say is going to show up on Saturday? And I don't know. I mean, I think 2.5. Really, this game to be 3, in my opinion, right? Because I really don't know.
Yeah, we're making a pick 'em because I'm with you. It could be 3, it could be 6, it could be 0. Like in the model here is putting 2. So I mean that's good logic check your model that it's actually living in data reality. But yeah, as far as my brain and my model, it's like I have no idea who this team is. I don't know. I mean, are we surprised at any outcome of this game? If Ole Miss wins, we go, oh, interesting. If LSU wins, we go, interesting. Like this is a nothing game to me because LSU is just not putting it together. And I guess if LSU wins by 21, I would perk me up a little bit and say, okay, but I'm not really worried about LSU offensively. I'm worried about LSU defensively. Because that's really, this is a team preseason when we did our preview. I remember one of the comments and one of the ideas that I had was everybody was really, really high on LSU coming in, but we looked at the matchup map at that time. They were behind a lot of the teams offensively and defensively. Now they were in the quadrant of elite, but in order for them to win the SEC, they needed to get better offensively and defensively. Now they're pretty good offensively. Okay. But they took 20 steps back defensively. And to me, that's where I have questions. Now, you need to put together an over-under model to really do this, but anecdotally here, one thing that jumps off here is you have offensive success rate on pass downs, which is basically a third down. You have an offensive success rate for LSU, 51%, going up against the defensive success rate of Ole Miss of 49%. That could be a big matchup. But the other thing is LSU is giving up 45%. So you may see an Ole Miss being able to convert third downs and just keep drives going and going and going. And if those drives are short, this number can get up quite high. That's more anecdotal, so don't take that as a pure advice, but maybe something to look into there. Defensive explosives, LSU's, getting a lot of explosive plays. The one thing with explosive plays, they're not necessarily predictive. You can't necessarily count on being able to do 3% of all of your plays every single week as explosive plays. But that's obviously dependent on the teams you're going up against. So I don't know. I'm with you here. Not a game I'm betting on. I have no interest. I think overall, though, there is some data to glean here, post week 5 and understanding who LSU is. More so, I think what we're going to probably learn is LSU is just kind of a all right team. Not too good, not too bad. They probably won't win the SEC West. It's probably Bama's, but that's the biggest thing for me that I'm kind of looking to gain here.
Yeah, that's spot on.
Cool. All right. Well, those are the 5 major matchups that we're looking forward to or that have the most clout. So I hope that was helpful. Remember, you can get all of the team data over at bullytheboard.com if you're interested in all of that. All right. Now the fun part, we get to talk about the model. What does the model have? What have we actually bet already? What did we see it open? And, how is the market looking? So overall, there are 6 plays, and we'll say an honorary mentionable with a 7th play. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is, because you can see the EV is quite high. So the first one we'll quickly get to is Houston, Texas Tech. This opened at 10. We were able to get 10. As of this afternoon, this was sitting at 8, right where the model put the number at. Love to see that CLV. Any thoughts here on this game, Steve? How does this game make you feel?
Houston was a team that I really haven't paid a lot of attention to. One of the ones where, I always think of them as a good offensive team and, kind of a middle of the road, defensive shoot them out kind of team. But I look at this like the last week card where I haven't paid a lot of attention. So I'm going full faith on the model.
Yeah. Little bit of faith. I think the Houston game, it's good to see the market agrees, but I will say Houston has had a really, really weird season where they've had ups and downs. They won against UTSA. That was pretty easy, but then they struggled against Rice, and then they end up losing, I think, actually to Rice. Very interesting here. Obviously, glad to see that the market's kind of agreeing. Texas Tech, though, is another interesting team because they played Oregon really tough. And we know now, I think, in my opinion, we know that Oregon's a good team. So, I'm a little interested there, but we'll see what ends up happening. But we bet against them last week and we covered with West Virginia. So good to see CLV there. The next one, Arkansas, Texas A&M. This opened at 7. I was only able to get a 6.5. Although the market is now come back, there are 6.5s and 7s in the market. You can bet this at 7 -110 all day. I think I was able to get a -105, 6.5, but this one's interesting because I will say Arkansas from afar, to your point, I haven't seen one of their games. They lost to BYU, and then they played LSU really tough. So I'm very, very confused about this team.
Yeah. Same here. I really don't know what to think. A&M for me too. It's one of those things where I don't think they had a really great win, but they played Miami a little close. And so, is that your litmus test? So going against 2 ranked teams again, Miami, LSU, who's really the better team? But they both kind of hung in there. So by that sort of pseudo, what do you call the transitive theory? I forgot whatever it's called. Yeah. I feel good taking. Yes, thank you. I feel good taking the points here, but I really don't know much about Arkansas either to feel good about them.
Yeah, and fair point. I mean, we give our followers and our paid board members access to the model right at open because we find that that's where we're going to have the most success. At this point, if you're watching it, one thing and one way you can play this information if you do want to tail us is maybe be a little bit patient. If you can get a 7.5, you're only going to get a little bit more value. So it's something to, keep an eye out. I have already played this. I got the 6.5. I'm not, backing down from there, but there is, a little bit of uncertainty because there are 6.5s and 7s in the market. Maybe there's a 7.5 that comes up for a second and you can scoop it up. Just a thought. All right. This one I love. The next one I love. Oklahoma, Iowa State. We've been talking about Oklahoma. We've been talking. Man, we think they're good. We think they're rolling. They're getting better and better and better each week. When I saw this, I was super duper excited. Opened at 20.5, currently sitting at 20 and 20.5 in the market. Our model puts the number at 21. Very reasonable. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. 3-score game is a highly, highly probable outcome here. And just that 1 point is a huge EV bump because, obviously, football scored in 7. So what are you thinking, Steve? Do you love this? I almost love it too much. I almost love it a little bit too much. And the fact that the market isn't slam dunking here, I'm like, ooh.
So 2 things. One, I absolutely do love this. This was one of the first ones when we released the picks. First one I want to make sure I grab. And there's this whole saying, you bet favorites early, bet dogs late. To Seth's point about maybe seeing you get a plus 7.5. Not a try and true thing. Obviously, if you're doing your due diligence, you're getting CLV no matter what. Now, with that being said, I don't know, man. I think for me, it just seems like no one's talking about Oklahoma. Iowa State's never really a sexy team, so I get that. But nobody is talking about Oklahoma. It feels like we're in on some insider trading thing right now, right? That's honestly what it feels like. But yeah, I love it. I love it all the way.
But that's why you use matchup maps. That's why you use data, because you're able to see things before, the human brain. I mean, what if Oklahoma goes and wins this game by 35? All of a sudden, the zeitgeist goes, "Oh wow, Oklahoma's really, really good." And it's like, yeah, they're really, really good. I think Iowa's still dealing with a number of suspensions, so that's really an interesting thing to keep an eye out on. And I wonder if one thing I'll be really excited to see, does this close at 21? Does it close at 21? Meaning the rest of the market also agrees with us. The number's 21. Let's hold off to bet that 20 until we can get some real money down. Thursday, Friday. Tomorrow's Thursday. Do we see some real money come in? Or Oklahoma move that to 21, and then everybody says, okay, yeah, that was the number. That'll be something I'm looking for. Okay, cool. There are 3 more here, and you'll see that the EV is a little bit less than 2%. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this. So at open, we look at all of the model outputs. We basically filter it by anything greater than 0. And what we do is we hit the marketplace and we shop for lines that are different than the kind of opening at the sharp places. What do I mean by that? So just to use as an example, Penn State, we see that it opened at 26. Our model puts that at EV. The model puts the number at 26. That gives us a little bit of EV there. But that being said, there was a 24.5 in the marketplace, right? So that bumped it up, gave us the kind of threshold. And now that those are sitting at 27 and 27.5. So it sounds like and looks like this thing is on its way potentially to on its way to 28. We'll see. Any thoughts on that game?
Yeah, no, love this. Penn State's another one of those teams where, in the Big Tens with all the Michigans and Ohio States, no one's really talking about PSU. And you told me about this. 24.5 was I think the second bet literally I had to go on place because of the issue of how rare it was. So yeah, I'm all over this.
Yep. And then the same thing here with Michigan. This opened at 18. There was a 17.5 in the marketplace. Now, this one is one that I wouldn't say moved against us is not the right word, but we didn't see extreme CLV. So this is still sitting at 17, and there's actually some 16.5s in the marketplace. So the market's a little bit of disagreeing with us on this. Now, Michigan defensively is super dominant, so I like that aspect of it. But the problem is, so is Nebraska. These are going to be 2 really good defensive teams. What do we see in ways of Michigan doing anything as far as offensive efficiency? I think the thing you're betting here is basically a 21. They win by 3 touchdowns. Yeah. And that's, I think, maybe the most thing that's going to be comfortable. Obviously, the raw model output puts this number right at 21. So I think that's not that crazy. Any thoughts here on that? This is probably my least. This is not my least favorite. It's my most fearful. I feel like Michigan could definitely get backdoored here.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I was looking at the matchup map earlier, when this thing first dropped, and I really can't make much sense of it. Now, again, me, I clearly I'm very high on Michigan's defense being their own stratosphere here, but Nebraska is just not shown me, at least. Now, granted, I'm not watching Nebraska game, all 4 quarters, anything like that, but Nebraska really just hasn't shown me that it has the explosive ability to keep up with the Michigans. Now, could you get backdoor in a kind of a tight defensive, run the ball kind of game? Absolutely, 100%. I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout by any means, but with that being said, I do see this being a field position game. Michigan doing enough of the right plays to get up 3 scores. I definitely wouldn't want to touch us anything more than that, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think possessions are going to be really rare in this game because time is going to be getting eaten up by both of these teams. That's where I'm fearful. Michigan controls the game, but they only win by 14 just because of the way the dynamics of this game. I can really see that happening. But whatever, all good. I'll take my EV all day. And then this is, other than Oklahoma, this is like up there with me as favorite. Why? I get to bet against what our model perceives as the worst team in the nation, and that's Nevada. So we're taking Fresno State. We were able to get 23.5. I believe these are now sitting at 25. So I like this pick. I like, even more at 23.5. And again, to me, I like it because we get to bet against one of the worst teams. And when things go bad, specifically in college, it seems like they get worse every week. And you could see that, this is a Fresno State team that's in the quadrant of elite going against literally the worst team. So, I mean, to me, it's a slam dunk.
Yeah, and let's not forget, and I know this doesn't really mean anything, but Fresno State's a top 25 team. Like the listen,
Yeah.
this is the classic of moving on up to the east side right now. So Fresno State, I'm definitely buying. I think there's the stock is rising, and this is just not maybe not so much that I believe in Fresno State, which I do, but I also don't believe in Nevada and by any stretch of the imagination. So this is getting it on both ends. So I love this bet.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there. Okay. So last we have the honorable mention here, and that's East Carolina versus Rice. And so you can see that the raw number puts this at East Carolina -8 and a regressing to +1, and the open was at 4.5. So one reason we don't have it on the like for sure got to bet is because we're seeing this interesting phenomenon in our modeling. When we look at back testing, which is what something you should and must do if you want to create an analytical tool for quantifying an edge. You want to understand how well you actually quantify an edge when you believe you do, right? And we see some interesting stuff. So anywhere from greater than 2% to about 6%, we see the model perform really, really well. Once we get above that 6%, what we see is a transition from the win rate. And if you just look at games where you have greater than a 6% expected value, the win rates are actually really low. So what we believe is going on is we're not modeling some key piece of information. And you can understand that could be a million different things of information. That could be injuries. That could be there's so many different angles that could exist that are really important that the model doesn't know about. And so it's not actually identifying value. It's identifying that you don't know something and the market does. And so what we're kind of pointing out and what we're a little bit, I would say, honestly, measuring in real time is when we group these games, how do they perform in real time? And this is kind of one of those games. Like, is this true what you would call alpha? Do you have almost an 8% edge? Or is Rice really, really, really good this year? And they really, really shit in past years. They have no blue chip ratio. Is there injuries? There could be a number of other things. And so your model perceives like, yeah, this Rice team should suck, but really they don't. There's a little bit of nuance there. So I hope you guys appreciate that. Steve, anything to add there or any thoughts on this game? Are you actually betting it? I know for me, I decided to stay away, but maybe you decide to bet it.
No, and when we, full disclosure, we had this talk kind of behind the scenes here, and Seth is explaining that same sort of thing. When you look back at this, if it's too good, it's one of those things like it's too good to be true. And in this case, we believe that it is. I mean, you look at it, and when you look at having that greater than 6% EV in our particular modeling, in our back testing, it doesn't do well, right? And so there clearly is something that's telling you, hey, you're missing something. This is not the time to be egotistical, and we don't want to lead you all down the wrong path, right? Like we're not trying to do this.
100%.
Right. So we're all about actual tried and true methods and having the best possible thing face forward. So no, I'm not touching this. I'm gonna say, hey, give me my slice of humble pie. There's something we don't know that we're not accounting for, and I'm gonna sit back and see what happens. Now I'm not gonna watch this game, but I'm gonna check the final box score.
I definitely, exactly. I'll do you one better. The model is already going to scrape whatever happens, so you don't even. I can just text you. We don't even have to do that. So yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head on the nail there. We are committed. I think a lot of people don't understand what we're doing. We're on kind of two separate missions or one really synergistic mission. We are committed to building a syndicate where we are becoming professional bettors and creating the databases and the models that we need to get to that goal. On top of that, we're bringing you all with us on this journey and what we're learning, how we're approaching it, and like just all the things that happen along that journey. And this is one of the things, like when you're quantifying edges and you want to get really good at that and really understand what your edge is, so you understand how to bet it and how to approach it, there's going to be situations where you need to say, I'm wrong here. Because if you don't identify those situations, you're just punting money away. And then the other thing too is what actual professional gambling looks like. It looks like this, where you have 3% edges and you're jumping for joy, or you have an Oklahoma matchup and you have a 2% and you're super psyched. That's what professional betting is. It's not, locks and Lambos and all these things where you are so omnipotent and you can just know things. If that was the case, so many people will be making money professional betting. But what do they flaunt over and over? Lifestyle. They can't even generate you one of these tables that tells you what their expected value is. So that's the key kind of thing for us, and why we kind of wanted to bring you into a little bit about, how the what do they say, the meat is made or whatever, because these conversations are really, really important. And I even had some members reach out to me and say, hey, why are you not having East Carolina on the card? Like that's like 8%. And let them know, like, hey, this is something we're seeing, and in our opinion, it's not something we think, we're not going to bet it because we think it's too good to be true. And quite frankly, the market agrees with us. This number's still sitting at 3.5, 4. If there's an 8% edge in the market, this thing would have been eaten up instantly. So, just wanted to point that out. So I'm super excited going into we're going into week 5. This is the week 5 of the model. I'm super excited. I think my favorites are the Oklahoma and Fresno State. Steve, any super excited bets for you? Anything you must bet that wasn't on the model or we didn't already talk about?
Yeah, no, I think the only thing that's going to be for me, it's going to be that Oregon State game. I know you had your words of caution, and I truly heed that, but I'm hard headed, so we'll see see how that turns out. Now I'm actually leaving to Canada in the morning, so I get all my bets in tonight, and I might try to see if I can get a little Thursday night action just to hold me over, knowing that I can't touch anything else once I leave.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think I'm gonna follow suit. I am gonna bet Notre Dame at the 5.5. I think you've convinced me. The model has a little bit of EV. Maybe there's even a little bit more at the 5.5. So that's another one that I'm betting on top of the model picks. Anything else, Steve, you want to talk about?
No, I just want to end by saying, this is why we do this. This is so much fun. It's so much work behind the scenes, and I got to get my hats off again to Seth here for really crunching all these numbers. But this is what betting looks like. This is what professional betting looks like. And once you do this with bankroll management and really get the discipline down, it's fun to have these weeks and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I am so stoked to see how we can keep that momentum going from last week to this week.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm wishing you all the luck in week 5, Steve, and happy travels. We will all see you going into week 6. Remember, if you are so inclined, we would be so grateful if you could like and subscribe. Comment here down below what your favorite pick is in week 5. We'd love to hear from you. And obviously, you can go to the website and see what the expected value is for all of the games this week and see if the model agrees or disagrees. All right, y'all, we're going to sign off, and good luck this week 5. We will all talk to you very, very soon. Peace.